Hey guys, Raya here. I got a wood burning kit as a gift this year and finally had some time to play around with the craft. Watch as I give it a try. The gift included the full kit plus a couple of small craft wood chests. The kit itself had wood burning tips, stencils, colored pencils, gloves, the iron, a rest, a pencil sharpener, tracing paper, some practice wood, a manual, and soldering tips. It was pretty easy to remove a tip from the barrel and put on a different tip. The iron had a range of possible heat. I started off by practicing with a flathead type tip. It was kind of tricky to get even pressure while moving, to try to get a straight line or even shading. Once I'd gotten a bit more familiar with the tool, I got out some of the practice wood and used the stencil to try an actual design. This part is at regular speed. You can see how slow the process is and how tricky it is with this tip to get any curve. I switched to a pointier tip to try a more complicated design. It was easier to get the outline and curve, but not very easy to fill in the shading with this tip. Once I was familiar with the process, I decided to find some designs for my pieces. The hexagon chest reminded me of honeybees, so I got a few different designs with that to work with. When I first saw the practice wood, I immediately knew I wanted to make Avatar Element coasters. And for the bigger chest, I decided to try a more complicated design with a mandala. I photoshopped all the images into SVG files and uploaded them to my Cricut to make stencils. I decided to start with the Avatar coasters since they were the most simple designs. I traced the design into the wood using the provided colored pencil, which wasn't great. Then I used a rounded point to do the initial outline to try to get clean lines. Overall, the iron wasn't great quality, so it kept getting loose from the orange plastic, making it difficult to get consistent pressure. Once I had a good outline, I switched tips to one with a flat side to try to get an even pressure burn. It was a little tricky to stay inside the lines and make sure only the perfect amount of edge touched the wood. And then I made the mistake of keeping the same larger tip for doing the small spiral on this design, which didn't give me the amount of fine control I needed for the small gaps, so I had to go back and repair it. The other three element symbols followed the same process. Obviously, the Water Nation symbol was a lot more complicated than the other three, so it took a lot longer to outline it, to make sure I was keeping track of the positive and negative space the right way. When I did the Fire Nation symbol, I decided to do the whole thing with the iron going the same direction to make it look more uniform, since it was going to be a big block of burned wood and it would be easier to see the mistakes in the results. The tiny spirals on the Water Nation symbol were tricky to work with. But I think these coasters turned out pretty good for my first time. Next, I worked on the honeybee box. The stencils didn't work well since they were just cardstock, but I made them work. I just had to do a bit of freehand drawing to make everything look good. The details on this box were a lot more fine, so I had to use the smaller tips for almost the whole box, which made it a little slow going. I messed up the first honeycomb pretty bad. I tried tracing paper and freehanding and it didn't look good. I switched to a slightly larger tip to fill in the beehive outline. The wood grain made it a little tricky to get an even burn. I struggled to get even lines with the rounded tip. It ended up sinking in really easily to the soft wood, making dots in places I didn't want them. I learned my lesson with the honeycombs and switched to a flathead tip, so I got nice straight lines on these in the end. Then I use the same flat edge to make a crosshatch pattern to add some dimension and shading. I really liked how that looked in the end. I used that same process to fix up the top of it, and added some larger honeycomb in the background for dimensionality. Then I tried to do more honeycomb on the back corners, this time dripping honey. I think these turned out really cool, especially with the shading on the honey adding different color layers. Then I made a new mandala stencil out of vinyl so I could actually stick it to the box to get a really good outline with such a complicated pattern. I had to fix a couple of the fine lines, but overall it was an easy process, although it did take a minute. I also switched from the colored pencils to a mechanical pencil, which made outlining a whole lot easier and clearer. Then I removed the stencil and was ready to burn. I used the flathead tip to outline the lines and try to shade in. This box must have had glue or something for some of these layers because the shading was really difficult in some spots, and it was fully melting or bubbling whatever was used instead of burning the wood. But I just turned up the heat and kept at it, and it worked out. Eventually, I realized the flathead tip was too big for the details, so I switched to the small rounded tip and just used varying pressure to get the tiny spots. This tip didn't do as well on shading the larger petals, but it was great for most of the design, except it was still tricky to get more even straight lines and avoid it looking really dotted. You can see the weird glue in the grain in the final product. But overall, I think it looks pretty cool. The final step was stain and lacquer. I wasn't sure which would be better, so I decided to try them both. The stain was supposed to go on evenly for a couple minutes, then be wiped off and dry for a couple hours. It was interesting that the coaster wood reacted differently to the stain from the hexagon boxwood. The lacquer just had to be shaken and sprayed in a few coats. The hexagon box only has the stain. The mandala box only has the lacquer. And I did both on the coasters. Overall, I really liked this craft. I thought it was a fun version of a coloring page, but with ridiculous heat. I think this is a fun way to make small gifts for people. This does seem like one of those crafts where higher quality tools would make a big difference though. Thanks for watching!